What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 111, and I'm the host of the show, Kyle Anzalone. Got a little different interview out today. I am talking Bitcoin with Phil Gibson of the Boy Named Pseu podcast. Great show. He always is talking Bitcoin and what's going on in the crypto world. And he's coming on the show today, not necessarily to do a Bitcoin 101, but to, I guess, answer some of my questions about Bitcoin and why I've been hesitant to buy more crypto. And he kind of goes into that. But then at the end, we get into actually how to purchase and how to hold and store your crypto, which I think, is really interesting for anybody who either doesn't have it or only has a little bit on like Coinbase or something like that. So I think people are going to get a lot out of today's show. I know it's a little bit different, but I have the links to the things that Phil is talking about in the show notes page. This is definitely one where if you're new to Bitcoin, you're not just going to, get everything you need in a 1 hour interview here. So check out, all the more information that I have listed out. But this is, again, a really great interview. And then stay tuned for after the end of the interview, I have a clip of a song that Phil did on and the Fed and Bitcoin that's really great. So again, check out everything that Phil is doing, and I'll have the links in the show notes page. Share this show, Odysee and YouTube for the video versions. You can find us on social media, Facebook, MeWe, and Twitter. And the show is hosted at the Libertarian Institute, where I'm the news editor and write the daily news roundup. You can also support the show by donating crypto. We had the Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash addresses to our wallets in the show notes page. So you get motivated to buy yourself some crypto. One of the first things you could do is send a little bit of it to me and Will for the work we're doing here. You can also support us by supporting our sponsor, Paloma Verde. The website, palomaverdecbd.com. Brand spanking new website. Of course, PalomaVerdeStore.com is the old URL, and that'll get you through a redirect to the new website. But once you go there, you could get yourself some great CBD products. I personally like their topicals. They're all high quality products. They all work and have the dosing as they should. They're the lab tested results. And so what's great is with this, I rub it on my back when I feel some pain, and the pain's alleviated, and it works very consistently for me. So PalomaVerdeCBD.com, and then you use the promo code PEACE, PEACE, to get yourself 25% off when you spend $75 or more. And here's the podcast with Phil. Hey Phil, how you doing today?
Awesome, Kyle. Stoked to be here. How are you?
Yeah, happy to have you on. I believe this is your first time on Conflicts of Interest. I will link to one of your past episodes on the old audio only show, Foreign Policy Focus, in the show notes page. But excited to have you on the new show today. And for people who don't follow you on Twitter, you mostly are tweeting about crypto stuff and talking about Bitcoin. And so I want to have you on to talk to my audience about it. I've been aware of the crypto thing from really the beginning. I remember when, people would talk about trading like large sums of Bitcoin for relatively cheap physical objects, the famous pizza that was bought for some insane number of Bitcoins and stuff like that. But I really never owned any. And a lot of the people that I have known that have owned Bitcoin, especially back from the early days, ended up losing them somehow. Either like physically losing like their physical like wallet that they had, or what was it, Mount Gox or whatever, where there's a major hit. But there's been other cases where people have lost their Bitcoin. So those are some of the reasons I haven't really gotten into or paid too much attention to crypto myself. However, I think with what we see going on around us, and I'm increasingly interested in cryptos of all kind, but specifically Bitcoin and what's going on. And again, from following you on Twitter, you seem like the perfect person to have on for this. So to start, like. To just maybe a brief example or explanation of actually what is a Bitcoin. Like if somebody owns a Bitcoin, what do they have?
Yeah, that's a solid place to start. Like, what is it? And that's kind of a whole can of worms, because Bitcoin It's a lot of things. You got Bitcoin, the network, which is with a capital B, and it's just a network like the internet because you and I, our computers are talking to each other, and we I have exponential connections from that because it's just all packets sending from one place to another on the internet, and so you have that as Bitcoin the network, and the Bitcoin network is of course how you send Bitcoins, or really, I like to think the plural of Bitcoin is Bitcoin. Um, you don't. Um, so yeah.
So yeah,
When
let's can I just ask you about that, because I guess that's one interesting thing, that now pretty much anybody I know can buy an entire one Bitcoin, right? So
Yeah.
if like I
So
buy some Bitcoin, is there a minimum amount that you would have to buy to own Bitcoin, or can you own even now at what, or when Bitcoin was at 60,000, can you own like $1 or a quarter, of US fiat worth of a Bitcoin?
yeah, you can own fractions of a Bitcoin, and those are broken into subunits called Satoshis, and those go out to like 8 decimal points. So there is a 100 million Satoshis in one single Bitcoin, similar to how there's 100 pennies in $1. And that, like a Bitcoin or Bitcoin, the currency is with a lowercase b. And yeah, I mean, what you also want to consider is that there is a finite supply of only 21 million Bitcoin. And, someone might say, who, he doesn't even, follow sound money principles and Austrian economics, or, just someone off the street, they're like, oh, well, that's not a Bitcoin to go around. It's like, no, I mean, even if we divide it out like to the eighth, like decimal point, we can still subdivide it infinitely. The important part is that you don't create more of it or inflate the supply. If it was like 21 million in one Bitcoin, you know, like the whole Bitcoin project would be over, because what everyone is invested in it, whether they know it or not, is this strict supply cap of 21 million Bitcoin, because that is really the ultimate value proposition, is that for once in our life we have this one sound money where the supply cannot be tampered with whatsoever, because the monopoly over money is what has caused all this chaos, in foreign policy, socially, economically. And this is how empires fall, is when you screw with the money supply. And I took plenty of notes I got in the Google Doc that we shared,
Right.
so we can definitely get into a lot of that. But I want to make sure. I don't know if you want to go in order with this, but I want to make sure I answer all your leading questions before we kind of get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just gonna. I would like to generally go in order, but it just as you talk, like certain things pop up, and I think hopefully questions that my audience, kind of shares, because I do know I have some people in my audience who are big fans of crypto and who are probably, like this conversation, they've had it with people trying to explain to them, but I think the
Yeah.
largest portion of my audience actually doesn't really know anything, and probably doesn't own crypto, or if they do, maybe they have some Bitcoin and Coinbase or something very
Right.
simple like that. And so I guess one thing that came up though is you said that there's only 21 million Bitcoin, and while that could be subdivided, it can't be inflated. Why is that the case? Like nobody could change the number of Bitcoins, and then the
Yeah.
other, I guess, thing to tack onto that would be, isn't that what Bitcoin Cash did, or is there something different about Bitcoin Cash?
Yeah, we can get into all of that. So it's a free open source software project, and it has a strict conservative way of how things change. And if you make more than 21 million Bitcoin, then what you do is hard fork it, which basically means it's not Bitcoin anymore because it's on a protocol level, right? So if you hard fork Bitcoin, that doesn't abide by the rules of Bitcoin. That's what happened with Bitcoin Cash, because they had this debate that they wanted to scale on like the Bitcoin blockchain. We'll like get into all of this, but essentially you are trying to, be the Federal Reserve and make your own money, and that's just not how Bitcoin flies. You play by the rules of Bitcoin or you don't.
Right.
Go have fun trying to make your own crypto, which by the way, crypto is the real C word to me because unfortunately it's been so bastardized by all these other Bitcoin copycats or thinking that they come from just a smart computer science background or whatever background. And they're like, oh, I'm new to Bitcoin, but I'm super smart, so I know how to fix it. No, Bitcoin is the highest performing asset of the past 12 years, and it got there without your help. So crypto is really just a distraction. It's a good entry point for a lot of people, but the longer that they are here and they understand Bitcoin specifically, they realize that other cryptocurrencies are no better than fiat because they have a central point of failure. But just to like get into that, referring to the doc, one of the first questions is that you're like, well, what's the difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum? Well, to back up, let's kind of start with what is Bitcoin, right? So I want to kick this off with a quote from F.A. Hayek, which what people under Ludwig von Mises and big fans in our, liberty-minded circle. But the quote is, I don't believe we shall ever have a good money again before we take the thing out of the hands of government. That is, we can't take them violently out of the hands of government. All we can do is by some sly, roundabout way introduce something that they can't stop. And that is what Bitcoin is. It was coincidentally, maybe not, I don't know. It was being worked on for years prior to the great financial crisis of 2008. But the fact is, it was born out of the ashes of the great financial crisis of 2008. And so what Bitcoin is the digital separation in physical, arguably, but it's ultimately the separation of money and state because it's true sound money. Again, that's because there's only 21 million. Unlike gold, you can't mine more Bitcoin than the supply of 21 million. So in a way, there's the 21 million Bitcoin have already been created. They just haven't been issued yet. And so every 4 years, the issuance of Bitcoin gets cut in half. So right now, when Bitcoin gets mined, the reward that miners get is 6.25 Bitcoin. And when it started out 12 years ago, over 12 years ago, almost 13, it was 50 Bitcoin is what you were rewarded. And so, yeah, it gets cut in half every 4 years, but, supply and demand, scarcity, why do people value rare collectibles like baseball cards? Like, value over time gets greedy, especially when you have people with a lot of money that are just crazy about this and are trying to find yield or store their value some way into something. All that value is going to go into the thing that cannot be tampered with supply-wise. So even, Bitcoin hit like over 60 grand this year. So it takes time for people to learn. And, you can't have that number bias, really. So I digress on that. But, there, as we kind of talked about, that 20 million supply cap is the value proposition of Bitcoin ultimately. And there have been many other attempts, but Bitcoin was just the first one to succeed because, speaking of 21, 2 and 1, Bitcoin is really the second and first amendment of the 20th century because of, here comes the crypto part of cryptography. Because just the way that cryptography is built, it allows us to protect our property rights, our wealth. And that's what makes Bitcoin confiscation and censorship resistant. But there have been other attempts. You had like DigiCash, BGold, a bunch of others, and there were good attempts. There were iterations, Hashcash. These were attempted ways of how to make a cyber cash by these cypherpunks who, love their Ayn Rand, love their Hayek, and wanted to use technology to free the individual by creating like a money that could really uphold the system. And we just have all these iterations, and they all failed because there was a central point of failure where there was like a Jerome Powell of sorts, or there was just somebody in charge of it, and you can't have that succeed. I mean, we saw with like the Liberty Dollar or whatever the hell it was, like they took those people out because there was clearly somebody that was in charge of it. And Bitcoin fixed that because it is completely decentralized, and it's the only cryptocurrency that is decentralized at a global scale. It's mined and bought and exchanged everywhere in the world, and it runs on the internet through people's voluntary action, and it cannot be turned off at all. So, going back to here. So yeah, you know, going back to cryptography, just like the whole freedom aspect of it, it was seen as a munition like by the U.S. government because it was created by the government and used in World War II, and it had to be fought for by Philip Zimmerman in court to be in the public domain back in the 90s. And so even if cryptography was created by the military, it's still a threat to them if it's let loose into the free market. Thus, that's how Bitcoin was spawned. So, I mean, Bitcoin is really the only trustless digital native currency, and uh, it's the only one that's persisted, and it thrives in the face of any interference and criticism from governments and companies. And it's also the only money with zero counterfeit currency in circulation, because you can't make any more. If you try, then you're forking the protocol and making your own thing. So, I mean, really, solely all these unique characteristics are impossible to achieve without, what we have is Bitcoin. But ultimately, the glue that holds it all together is Bitcoin's proof of work system, which is kind of what makes it digital gold in a sense, because you have to work hard to mine it, to create it. You have to it's an investment to make this thing, and it's irreversible. Just like, you have to buy sticks of dynamite and blow up the earth, and need an Olympic swimming pool amount of water to, pressure all like this gold out from the ground. So it's similar, but much more cost efficient and more environmentally friendly than digging gold. But I mean, why buy Bitcoin in the first place? Like, the money's broken. Okay, right? I mean, again, it emerged from these cypherpunks. And I mean, Julian Assange, like the likes of Julian Assange and like the giants before him, and really how it affects people not just at like an investment level, but it's unstoppable. It's unstoppable, programmable money that can't be debased or censored, and that's why WikiLeaks was able to, swerve around PayPal when PayPal cut them off, stopped letting people send them money as donations. Like, Bitcoin was there for them. So it fights surveillance and confiscation, and it really works for it works for everybody, but it also works from the inside. All the people in Washington will want to have this because they'll be trying to find yield everywhere they can, but it works everywhere in the world in all aspects on a voluntary basis, because the problem that we have with our money is that we don't have choice at all. And Bitcoin actually gives us an option to opt out. And so, again, like fat cats in Washington and Wall Street are going to get suckered in by riches, which, they will be rewarded if they start buying Bitcoin. As we see, like corporations, Michael Saylor of MicroStrategy just bought, I think, like $10 million more worth of Bitcoin because there's been a recent dump, but he converted his entire treasury, I think his entire treasury, into Bitcoin. So he was sitting on like a melting ice cube, as he explains it, of $500 million that was just being debased and losing its value because of all the money printing that's been going on and bailing out these irresponsible corporations. And so, that in itself is going to be like the first value proposition on like a bigger scale, because this past year people are finally starting to actually take this seriously, because when it comes to investment, they really don't have any other choice.
Right.
So
I feel like too that for if you have $500 million and your ice cube is that big, I think it's easier to see it melting sooner. But when you don't have very much money, that you don't realize the inflation. I mean, you notice the price of milk creeping up a little bit, but I think I saw some people saying that just like in a month, the CPI, the inflation index was up like 0.6% or something, which is a huge number. So
Yeah.
it's going to get to the point where your money is, flowing away so fast that this could be a legitimate way to hold your money. That way it doesn't get completely inflated away and you get to keep your purchasing power. So the price of milk goes up, the price of Bitcoin goes up, but at least you could still buy the milk for the same amount of Bitcoin, even if it costs 5-10 times as much US dollars.
Yeah. Like Bitcoin is hard to grok, but people, there's a guy named Alex Svetsky who I think came up with this, maybe someone else, but Bitcoin, people either kind of Bitcoin out of curiosity or pain, or like out of necessity, as we're seeing in countries like Lebanon and Argentina, like where they have hyperinflation. They don't have any other choice. In some of those countries, they can't even get Bitcoin. But, Bitcoin is kind of like this global option, and it will just make sense for people because, they won't ask what is Bitcoin, they'll ask how. Andreas Antonopoulos always likes to talk about that fact. So, I mean, yeah, we can keep on going if you want, but if you
Well,
have
no,
any
I
other
think
questions that came
that's
up.
a really important point to make, and I actually think we're getting closer to that time where it's not going to matter what a Bitcoin is. I mean, most people don't ask what a Federal Reserve note is, right, or how that's back, how the mechanics of that work, who has control over that, what the value of that dollar is going to be in some amount of time. And so I think people are starting to get less interested in like the whole what is a blockchain and like stop with these like silly like,
Yeah.
oh, how many
What is a
unicorn coins
blockchain? Is a
for a
chain of
Dumbledore
blocks.
token or
That's all you
whatever.
need to
Yeah,
know.
right. um
I, it's more appropriate to call it a time chain because it's this giant, like global clock that just keeps track of time of value moving from point A to point B, and that can't ever be reversed. That's all it is.
right.
It's just this giant ledger similar to the Google Doc that we're sharing, that everybody has access to. But in order to change it, you need to prove work, or um, well, you basically kind of need to ask everyone's permission or just tell everyone what you are doing. But that's at a pseudonymous level, and with more tech innovations. Like, oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, sorry, my screen froze. I was just making sure. Um, anyway, yeah. But there's a lot to Bitcoin that people can't get distracted by with the hype of blockchain or whatever it might be. But I think that is slowly starting to die down.
Yeah,
It's
I
a necessity.
yeah, I feel like I noticed that too. So now one of the things going on is not only is there Bitcoin, but there's hundreds, maybe thousands of other coins. But in
Three
serious,
thousand, like 5,000, but it's ridiculous. Also irrelevant.
but there, okay, but even then, there's like a couple dozen coins where the market cap is like, I don't know, billions, but tens of millions of dollars. And particularly the one people point to is ETH, and they say this is the coin that's going to surpass Bitcoin. I mean, like, are you somebody that's like, hold like 10 different coins, hold 20 different coins? Are you like just a Bitcoin guy? And then I'm just like,
Yeah,
most people don't understand the difference. Some people like once you get more advanced, I guess a lot of it comes down to transaction fees and exactly how much it's going to cost you to trade these coins. But
yeah, totally.
take that from wherever you want to go. I know that was kind of a vague and
Yeah, man.
question.
So I am a monetary freedom maximalist, and the only way to achieve that is through sound money. The only way to achieve that is to buy Bitcoin and only Bitcoin. Anything other than Bitcoin is really just a distraction. If you're a trader and you think you know what you're doing, like sayonara, best of luck. You probably know how to use shit coins, as I like to call them. Use shit coins to get more Bitcoin. Some people know how to do that. Lucky you. I don't really have the time because money should hold its value in your savings, and therefore you shouldn't have to take the time to find all these investment options, right? That's what the cancer of inflation and arbitrary monetary policy does, is that it causes people to just, freak out, figure out what to do with their wealth. And they just end up wasting time and having to become like financial experts and just invest all their money away, or use Bob the stockbroker to, just trust him and put all your 401k and whatnot and everything into some index. That's the difference with Bitcoin. You're your own bank, and you don't have to trust anyone, because you can trust that the Bitcoin network will secure your wealth, and it will hold and accrue its value. But to back up, I think a good place to start is to compare and contrast Bitcoin from Ethereum or everything else. And the place to pick that up is really describing like Bitcoin mining. Like, how do you get Bitcoin in the first place? Not like buying it from an exchange, but how's it created? And the best way to explain that is like Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, right? So you have all these kids all around the world, and they go out and they take their allowance money or whatever, someone's money. You had to earn that money at work or whatever. So you had work that went into getting that money, and you exchange that work for a candy bar. And then you have to exert more work to open the candy bar and hope that you get a golden ticket, right? And it's not always a guarantee that you get a golden ticket. So you have to do more work and unwrap more candy bars and buy more candy bars until you're lucky enough that you get a golden ticket. This is how Bitcoin mining works, basically. So at a global level, you have again, going back to a network of computers, you have a network of computers that voluntarily come together to, similar to buying and unwrapping the candy bar, they are solving like a math problem. It's kind of like how bingo works, like in that little bingo ball basket thing. It's basically playing bingo. And the way that they unwrap that candy bar is by exerting a lot of electricity. And because that is basically, it takes up the majority of their operation costs, they got to find that electricity at a really cheap price. And the way they do that is use renewable energy. So there's basically like net, like no emissions being wasted, because all these green energy solutions that are out there, they actually end up creating a lot more energy that doesn't get used up, because the way that many grids are created is that they are made to operate as if everybody needs to consume 100% of this energy. And that's not what happens, right? So really, Bitcoin fixes that by eliminating that waste. Ironically, these green solutions create waste, but that is how it's Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. And the golden ticket rewards you the issuance of Bitcoin into the Bitcoin economy. So right now, like I mentioned earlier, is 6.25 Bitcoin that miner machine gets rewarded, or the miner. And usually how a mining operation looks is it's you're either like on the grid and you have a system, or you're off the grid. And what a Bitcoin miner looks like, if anybody wants to do like a Google search, just type in like Bitcoin ASIC miner, AISIC. But they also kind of look like guitar head amplifiers in a way. But they're these little like metal suitcase, rectangular box looking things that have like a grill fan on them, and they're computers, and they all plug into the same network that they're on, either on or off grid. And they shovel all this like heat energy in there, flip on the computers, and boom, like off they go. And they all try to solve like this math problem, but it's really just a game of chance. And they're just hashing away. And what these miners are doing is that they're taking inputs of the Bitcoin network, and they are trying to guess this like bingo number. They're trying to guess a like a bingo number that is less than the like a target number. So that target number is called a nonce, like a number used only once. And they had to be lucky that as they're solving this problem, that they guess a number that is less than the nonce. And when they do, that's how you strike gold. That's how you get your golden ticket. That's how you're rewarded Bitcoin. And so when they get rewarded Bitcoin, those 6.25 Bitcoin go to like the Bitcoin wallet that's installed on the computer. So a little into the weeds there, but I might need to refer back to the notes because none of that was on the agenda. But I mean, if you don't understand it already, like this is like what it equates to digital gold. And this proving and using expanding work is Bitcoin's proof of work algorithm. So as I said, it like requires these nodes on the network or computers to use a significant computational power to mine new blocks. And those inputs I was talking about, this is how you mine a block, is that it takes the inputs of the transaction. So if I'm sending a transaction to you, it's going to like take my public key address, like think of it like an email address. So like my email address at gmail.com, and I'm sending it this much Bitcoin, and it's going to your email address at gmail.com. Like all these inputs and data is like what you use. It's called a hash function. So go back to like algebra or whatever level of math you took. You learned about like functions. This is basically what you do. And the Bitcoin miner computer is hashing away and using our inputs, and it's is like whatever answer that they get out of the inputs that gets and the hash answer happens to be a number that is less than the nonce that we talked about, the target number, then they win the Bitcoin. But they also hash like our hash, the record of our transaction gets put into the Bitcoin block, which is just like, think of it like the Bitcoin blockchain is just a ledger, and think of a block as like when you're looking at your bank statements and it's like the month of May or whatever, it's just like a tallied up like transaction, kind of like itemized. And so that's what the Bitcoin miners are doing. They're doing us a favor by making the network work, by recording all the transactions that happen, and all of the money and power that is expended into making these miners run is what creates like that wall, kind of like amber, like a mosquito getting caught in amber, like from billions of years ago. Like it's pretty much like that, and that is why it is so expensive to undo everything that happened on the Bitcoin blockchain, because it's just not cost effective. And if something like that were to happen, one, it's nearly impossible because you're attacking the network, and you just have to continue expending that much like money and energy to keep attacking it, which is not like feasible. Um, and that's also what makes Bitcoin like immutable, you know? So instead of like buying your fiance a diamond ring, like like you can make a Bitcoin transaction and like write out in that block that you know, that you made the transaction in, like, honey, I love you, will you marry me? Like that right there is exponentially more valuable than buying a goddamn engagement ring. But I digress there. Uh, so yeah, like once a block has been added to the blockchain, any changes to a transaction included in that block requires the redoing of that proof of work of all of the blocks preceding it, all of the blocks going back nearly 13 years ago. So that doesn't fly with Bitcoin. So this proof of work is intentionally structured to be extremely costly, and that extreme cost is what discourages anyone to commit fraud on Bitcoin, and that's how consensus is maintained. So this is what makes Bitcoin so reliable and secure despite its lack of central authority. And this is exactly what makes Bitcoin different from any other cryptocurrency out on the market. And I just want to take a quote from Satoshi himself, is that this is from the Bitcoin white paper, once the CPU effort, computer processing unit, which, we use, like these are units that people were using on their laptop. You can't do that today. We might get into that later. But once Satoshi says in the white paper, once the CPU effort has been expended to make it satisfy the proof of work, the block cannot be changed without redoing the work. As later blocks are chained after it, the work to change the block would include redoing all the blocks after it. So again, it just goes to show how Fort Knoxy impossible it is to screw with the Bitcoin network. Because when Satoshi designed proof of work, he was fundamentally changing how consensus between humans is formed from political votes to apolitical votes. And those apolitical votes, as we talked about, were the hashes via this conversion of energy. Because, I mean, you asked what Bitcoin was. Like, Bitcoin is energy. Like, Bitcoin is representation of energy, of work, of blood, sweat, and tears, and investment. I mean, that's ultimately kind of like what it is. So proof of work is about a lot of stuff, but itself it's really about physics, not so much code, right? You know, you can't create or destroy energy; it's only transferred, and that's what you're doing. You're taking this abundance of energy, and instead of that like just being like wasted, it's being transferred into make literal money. So Bitcoin is like this super commodity minted from energy, and it's just like this fundamental commodity of the universe, and that's what proof of work is doing. It's like transmuting electricity into digital gold.
Okay. Um.
And that's why Ethereum sucks, because it's not Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin's really no better than a Wall Street bailout, because that's kind of what happened. I think it was in 2016. There was something called the DAO hack, which back in like the last like crypto craze, 2016, 2017, you had all these people making projects on Ethereum, and it's kind of like this is the wild west of investing now and venture funding, and a lot of money was put on this um smart contract, and it was called the DAO Act, decentralized autonomous organization, and this is how like they were going to raise money, and 14% of Ethereum, like in the Ethereum ecosystem, was lost, and you took basically like the Federal Reserve like board um, of Ethereum, the Ethereum Foundation, and Vitalik Buterin himself, the guy that created Ethereum, they all decided to just like mulligan, we're gonna redo it, and they just undid that hack. Uh, and what this did was change the underlying protocol and made Ethereum hard fork. And this hard fork for Ethereum was the ultimate like bailout, because it was the elites in control of Ethereum who bailed themselves out. So they've been trying to plan to move to proof of stake instead of proof of work, POS, or piece of shit. But in this proof of stake system, your control of the system is based on your wealth in the system itself. And if you think about it, like, what is so different than the current fiat system if that's the case? If the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, that is how Ethereum kind of operates. It's not meant to be this sound money. It's great for experimentation in R&D, and if anything is worth doing for the long term, it'll be adopted on Bitcoin at this layered approach, but it's not sustainable long term. So had Ethereum bit the bullet and just let the free market do its thing, it would have risked, the rich fat cats of Ethereum. It would have risked their political control in the future. And so they still haven't moved to proof of stake because, I mean, central planning never works, does it? And I think they maybe just have a lot at stake, because if proof of stake didn't work at all, they still would have they have like the whole value of Ethereum in there. And a lot of that value that's back in Ethereum is like hedge funds and venture capitalists that are backing the Ethereum developers, which doesn't really help with its central control aspect. And so, yeah, like the greatest safety net should be your savings, as I alluded to earlier, which Bitcoin is, not Ethereum. Ethereum was created because Vitalik really wanted to add a bunch of things to Bitcoin that was not compliant with the protocol without hard forking. So, him adding all these things would have risked the decentralization and the sound moneyness of Bitcoin. So Vitalik just, he made his own project. That's what Ethereum was. And yeah, I mean, to Ethereum's credit, they haven't pulled in another bailout like we saw with the DAO hacks. But I mean, regardless, he acted as like the Federal Reserve, and they kind of operate by hard forking all the time and increasing the supply. And you don't want to trust that with your life savings, do you? So nobody can do this with Bitcoin. Like that's the ultimate thing. Anything other than Bitcoin is practically fiat, as far as I'm concerned. So,
So
I mean, yeah,
when you say that, so I understand now the problem with that. So let's say, can't somebody else, not somebody, some group of people create another coin that is decentralized like Bitcoin, and
uh,
then you know create like maybe some protocols that make it so it's either a little bit more secure, it's a little bit easier to transfer, or like the transaction fees are cheaper. I I'm guessing that doesn't exist, but like hypothetically, could it? And because that, I think, is a lot of thing that people are like, well, Bitcoin kind of in a sense came from nowhere. I know you explained where it came from, but in a way, like it's it's not like gold where like you have to go find it somewhere like in the ground. And so can't somebody else do something very similar to Bitcoin with all of its best aspects, and then like made some improvements too? And I think this is like an argument that I frequently heard from like Peter Schiff. So like, again, like I'm not trying to like just go
yeah,
on Bitcoin bashing, but I do want to address these like kind of pretty common themes that I hear. And I gotta agree that like some of these things are like objections that immediately come to my mind whenever I really consider
yeah.
about getting into Bitcoin.
No, I love these objections. So, like off the bat, it was created by Satoshi Nakamoto, but he left the project in 2011. I arguably like I think he's dead. I think he's passed. Um, but like there's no one in charge of this thing. It takes the consensus of the entire network for a change to occur. And again, if you were to manipulate the supply in any way, then it's just not Bitcoin anymore. And if there was something better than Bitcoin, it would have happened already. But we already have nearly like $1 trillion into this, depending on what the price is doing. But regardless of what the price is doing, it doesn't change the like only decentralized sound money on a digital scale that the world has ever known. It doesn't change that it is the first successful and only successful for once in our lives digital bearer asset uh, of information. Like I can memorize 24 words in my head and walk across the border stark naked and have my life savings in my head. Like it doesn't change that aspect, and it doesn't change how difficult it is to create more Bitcoin. And the reason why it's so difficult to create more Bitcoin is because more hash power or more Bitcoin miners are being added to the network every single day. And the more people that are mining Bitcoin, of course, the higher the price goes, right? Supply and demand, that causes the price shock. But as more people get added to Bitcoin, because more are added, the algorithm in Bitcoin is designed so as such that unlike gold, when you can mine more, when people demand more of it, and you make more gold, and you just flood the gold market, it gets exponentially harder to mine Bitcoin. The more people that mine it, and this is called the difficulty adjustment. And every 2 weeks there is an adjustment in the difficulty depending on if it's too easy to mine Bitcoin. And on average, a Bitcoin block is mined in 10 minutes, right? On average. And so to keep this like natural like, equilibrium, like Bitcoin's like this living, breathing like lung. It's like an organism that we keep like living, and it thrives off of voluntary interaction, like this true free market technological phenomenon. But for it to like live and adjust by the demand and know that it needs to become
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, right. And we're back. And I'm in the light now. So sorry about that, folks. But anyway, long story short, if you want to save your savings, don't put it into some garbage like Ethereum. Okay. And we'll probably keep moving along. You know, better reasons for, why that is the case. But skipping along here, like the way that you scale out Ethereum is just like you scale out the internet. And Kyle will have like links in here, but if anyone listening goes to Google TCP/IP, that's the layer protocol version of how you scale out the internet. So you can't shove all of these gizmos into one layer protocol on Bitcoin, because that's just how you break things. Because you want Bitcoin on the layer one blockchain to do one thing and one thing only, and that is to store transactions and can't be reversed at all. And that's how you keep sound money. Because as we'll get into, like, what is the problem? The money's fucked. The money's broken. Can I swear on here? Okay, cool. Yeah,
People
the
do.
money's broken. Some people do. Okay, I'll try not to have a potty mouth. But yeah, so what we have for faster transactions, you have basically layers. So layer two will be the Lightning Network and side chains. But basically, you have kind of like how you have with FedWire in the fiat system. You have FedWire, like money moving just in a database, but from one bank to one bank is final settlement, or like buying treasuries. Like, sorry, I'm hitting my mic. Um, so you have like FedWire, right? Moving the funds there. And then on top of that, you have Visa, the Visa network for payments. So it's just, again, like quick movement, but it's not settled. But you, as the user, you just see, oh, yeah, I spent like money on my credit card, or even like from my debit account. But that's just a movement of payments. And it's just docked from your checking account, and it's gone. And it says that like $5 or whatever left, but that doesn't actually settle until later. So it's reasonable that you have like a layered solution. Like all financial systems are a layered solution, and it only makes sense that you apply that to Bitcoin, because that's how you scale the stuff out.
Yeah.
So
So that kind of makes
that's the way
sense
we're
to
going.
me. Like
Yeah,
that
unlike
as
Ethereum, where they shove. But real quick, unlike Ethereum, where they do try to shove all these things on one layer, um, their fees are astronomically high, like a record. And what this prompted was Binance Exchange, to create like Binance Chain to compete with Ethereum, because everyone liked doing all this like DeFi crap, which was just like a shitcoin casino thing. And they're like, oh, I got all these like winnings and gains, but I had to like spend them all on transactions. So Binance was arguably a cool like free market solution response to that, but still, like, it's not some money, it's a centralized thing, which even on like the layer solution on top of Bitcoin, you're still going to have centralization. But the thing is that markets are based on trust and reputation. So yeah, like you're going to have centralization on top of the layer of money, but as long as there's no centralization on that core layer on the Bitcoin blockchain/time chain, and nobody can arbitrarily manipulate the protocol and just inflate it willy-nilly, that's the thing that matters. And that is what keeps the core incentive pure. And as long as everybody understands that, then by default, following the rules of Bitcoin, they will have to abide by its rules and create their businesses and operations around that and have it be their guide. And so that incentive will just kind of like run down the stream of anyone that tries to do anything on top of Bitcoin and find the best efficient way possible to create a great user experience for the end user.
So I guess the last thing, and maybe this is my last like real objection to Bitcoin to bring up, and this is something that I feel like is maybe a little bit again like kind of a Peter Schiffism, which is that the price
Yeah.
fluctuates a lot, and people will point to recently Elon Musk was able to accept Bitcoin for Tesla, and then say he's not accepting Bitcoin for Tesla, and this caused massive fluctuations in the price of Bitcoin. There probably is somebody out there that bought Bitcoin at $65,000, right, and now has less money in fiat than they had before, and they're probably freaking out a little bit about that. And so, what do you see, like, Bitcoin becoming more stable in the future? I mean, obviously, most people who have bought Bitcoins probably have bought them at, you didn't buy it at the exact peak of everything, and now isn't down, $20,000 per coin or whatever. But people lost money, but generally, I feel like most of the people I know who have owned Bitcoin, who haven't actually physically lost their Bitcoin, have made money off of owning Bitcoin.
Yeah. Welcome to Bitcoin. The price goes up and down. Get used to it. You can trust it more than any other financial system. So it's volatile because people are learning what it is, right? And this is price discovery. And we are fortunate enough to live through this, uh, again, like natural free market phenomenon of witnessing a monetary asset monetize. And anyway, like going to Elon, he was spreading FUD that he's going to sell all of his Bitcoin or all of Tesla's Bitcoin, whatever. And that it was more of the board's decision that Tesla buys Bitcoin instead of his. Whatever the case, it's FUD. And he was also spreading like FUD that it won't scale, and there's mining centralization FUD. And it, I don't know. I think his ego's really gotten to him because he clearly doesn't understand it. And like, regardless if he understands it or not, what he's really doing is giving everyone a blessing. This is called a sale in Bitcoin when it dumps, because people that are convicted throw every piece, modicum of dry powder they can at it, because the more you have, the better off you are. And again, this is just a learning process. Okay, not everybody is naturally programmed to understand the capacity of finite digital scarcity. So, and again, like Peter Schiff is just a fudster. Like his son's buying it for him, most likely, right? This is just great marketing for both Elon and Schiff.
So,
But
this is on.
yeah,
I don't even like to bring him up when it comes to Bitcoin, because I was listening to him 10 years ago, and probably even more now, like 2007, 2008. I started listening to him, and he's been talking about Bitcoin this whole time and has been against it the whole time. But look, had I bought Bitcoin when he was telling me it wasn't worth anything, it would never be worth anything, I would be a very rich man right now. So yeah, I don't like to use him as a
it's not too
specific
late.
example, but he is one that I feel like the most prominent people, echoing these. And yeah, so anyways, let's talk about now. So let's say, start out with somebody who doesn't own Bitcoin, never has owned Bitcoin, or had so long ago that, or has only bought Bitcoin on Coinbase. How would you recommend setting up a crypto account? Who's going to give you the best transaction fees, especially if you're not investing, say, $5,000, something less than that?
Yeah, the best thing to do is, one, it's super easy. If you have Cash App on your phone, you can buy Bitcoin there. No matter where you buy Bitcoin, make sure that you take self-custody of that, which means to start with small amounts. Again, you said under 5,000, whatever. You go and you download a Bitcoin wallet. So go to your app store, whatever device you have, and download Blue Wallet. There's blue and green, like the colors, blue and green. They're two good options, but I would start with blue. It just has a nice user experience, user interface. And this is, I know I've said that the digital scarcity is like the main value proposition of Bitcoin, but that pairing with your own bank now and putting on your big boy or big girl pants and actually owning your money, that's really the main proposition, I think, to me. So when you're going to download this software, this wallet, you're going to write down your 24 words somewhere safe, so you never ever lose it. Memorize that if you want, and just start with that much. And you can buy on a recurring basis on Cash App. There's another one called Swan Bitcoin, which I have a ref link if you want to use. Like, you can get $10 worth of free Bitcoin. If you go through my ref link, it's just swanbitcoin.com/Phil. And they have the cheapest fees, like 80% cheaper than Coinbase. And you can set up on a recurring purchase, like, you know, $20 a week, $100 a week, whatever, a month. I buy daily. And that happens in the background and pulls from your bank account after you like get confirmed KYC and all that garbage. And like pretty much every exchange has this now. River.com actually was a huge resource in helping me find the info to help talk about what we're going to talk about today. River.com is also Bitcoin only, and make sure if you can go to the Bitcoin only option. So far I say Cash App, Swan Bitcoin, and River.com. River Financial, those guys are awesome. They also have a mobile app as well. Their fees are a little higher, but nothing like excruciating. And you're getting what you pay for as well, just like the user experience and everything. And I don't know, if you like I do believe that Bitcoin's going to hit 6 figures by the end of this year, then I think that will cover any fees that you ever pay for. But really, just I like calling it saving your savings. You're setting and forgetting. And the cool thing about Swan too is that you can have it sent automatically to your own personal wallet that you set up. And there's guides on how to help you set that up, but you can have it pulled, your fiat pulled from your bank account to have you buy Bitcoin on a daily, weekly, monthly, whatever basis. And then after that, once you hit some sort of like amount of Bitcoin that you have, like some threshold, it automatically gets sent to your personal wallet. And you can always go in and manually like withdraw it and send it to your personal wallet. And there's a bunch of great tutorials on like Bitcoin wallets. I recommend BTC Sessions. Just Google him or YouTube him. He's got a YouTube channel. There's all these great tutorials on how to use all the great Bitcoin wallets, how to set up a node, which nodes we didn't really touch on, but like a node, you don't need to be a Bitcoin miner to have a node. You can just have like a Raspberry Pi, which is a $25, $30 computer. And if you download the blockchain on it, you can basically actually be your own bank, and you are basically running an audit on the Federal Reserve. Not really, but you are being like a sovereign individual of your finances, and you basically have a copy of the whole Bitcoin network. And if Bitcoin goes down for whatever reason, you can like boot it back up in your bedroom. But I digress on that. But you can, with Swan, have it directly sent to that node that you set up. But go to, check out BTC Sessions if you want to get nerdy and in the weeds on this stuff.
All right.
And it's empowering.
So when you talk about the Blue Wallet, that's an app. Like I have an iPhone, so I go to the App Store, I download that. Yeah. Now there are physical wallets too, right? Do you recommend those, like in keeping?
Yeah.
And what would be the difference between having it on your like through like a software or an app on your phone versus some kind of physical wallet?
Yeah. So like, don't carry more than that $5,000 or whatever. That even might be a little high. Don't carry more than that on your software wallet, on Blue Wallet. With Blue Wallet, think of it as like you're spending money. Not that you should be spending Bitcoin by any means, but for some things you have to. Like that was my first experience. I bought a VPN because I got fed up with my bank blocking my transaction, both on my credit card and my debit card. And they're like, flagged, you can't use this. So I'm like, screw you, I'm going to use Bitcoin and buy this. So Bitcoin's there for every purpose, really. But the wise thing to do is to don't spend your Bitcoin, or at least if you have a decent amount, don't spend your stash. And that is what the cold wallets are for, these hardware wallets. And coming back to BTC Sessions, Ben Perrin is his name. He's a great dude in Canada. Has one of the best Bitcoin podcasts out there, other than mine. But he's just a great dude. He does all of these instructional walkthroughs on how to set up your hardware wallet. There are Trezor, there's Ledger, there's Cold Card, which is the one I personally use because it is the most secure and tried and true. Yeah. Okay. If you're just starting out, you probably don't. It might be intimidating to you, but I imagine that your listeners are smart because they get good info and truth, and they don't shovel mainstream BS into their skulls. So they might be able to figure out. I have faith in them. But yeah, Cold Card is like the most secure. Is it looks like a little calculator. It's the most cypherpunk looking thing. But yeah, BTC Sessions has guides on all of these things. So if you want your life savings on here, you'll put your money, your Bitcoin on this. And to make it even more secure, just like in a safety deposit box, you have like 3 different keys and they're spread out geographically. The same concept is applied to Bitcoin with something called multi-sig or multi-signature, because when you spend a Bitcoin transaction, you like under the hood, you're signing a Bitcoin transaction with your private key or the secret words that allow you to spend. But what you can do is that you can basically have multiple hardware wallets, like 2 out of 3, and think of those as they're not your keys per se, but they're your signing devices. And you basically need the permission of these 3 hardware wallets. So, I mentioned my Cold Card, Ledger is another one, and there's Trezor. So imagine if you had like 3 of these, and you needed to turn them on, operate them, and you need to like sign with all 3 of them. They're signing devices like pens on checks. You have to sign with all 3 of them in order to spend that Bitcoin somewhere. And that is really becoming the standard, especially when you have these large financial institutions and small businesses. And like this is going to be the standard for storing wealth, storing treasuries. It's called the Glacier Protocol. Um, so this is going to be like the norm mostly of how people store their Bitcoin. Like some individuals might store it just on one device and even memorize the 24 words in their head, whatever. But if you're a large company or even an individual and you're thinking like long-term generational wealth, then you want to create as much security by adding redundancy and just more walls, like build your own Fort Knox of your own life savings around you, and checking out those tutorials that BTC Sessions does, and really grokking like what it is that you're doing and the responsibility that you're taking as an individual in protecting your wealth and using this technology is really one of the most like liberating things, like tools of freedom that any individual has ever gotten to experience.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Phil. This was great. And, for just coming on here and basically letting me ask you all of my really, objections that I have about Bitcoin. And I guess not even these were like found convictions I had, but just, questions that pop into mind when I see people talking about it. And I think a lot of my audience has the same questions. And obviously, just like anything I talk about on the show, you can't just listen to one episode and now, I understand what's happening in Palestine. Obviously, you're going to have to put in more time if you really want to understand your Bitcoin, how to secure it, and why it's the best crypto out there. But you have a podcast that does that, so tell people where they could like specifically follow you to like stay informed and learn more about crypto and or Bitcoin and any other like particular recommendations that you would have for my audience.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks for having me on. It was great. If you'd like to have me on again to talk about like the foreign policy and geopolitical aspect, I'd love to do that. There's a lot we didn't get to on this, but yeah, it's really kind of a rabbit hole. And once you kind of understand that, whether you fall on like libertarian principles or just anti-war, whatever, all that's awesome. Like you need to equip yourself with knowledge and history and like how we got to where we are. But for once, we actually have a tool that we can use to implement this stuff. And if it wasn't for the Federal Reserve and going off the gold standard and implementing the petrodollar and picking and choosing favorites and using the dollar as a geopolitical weapon and just using it to maintain the American empire. I mean, now we have a tool that can completely turn the tables over. And that's what Bitcoin is. So I talk about all that stuff on my podcast called A Boy Named Pseu, similar to the Johnny Cash song, but it's spelled Pseu as pseudonym or pseudonymous. And I drop an episode probably once a week, Mondays usually. Sometimes I'll do something extra. And yeah, I have just the great minds on there from in the Bitcoin world, and yeah, I just have people on smarter than me, so I can really understand and grok this freedom tool and how it works. And first and foremost, I was a musician before really getting into this, and after the whole market scare dump fiasco that happened in last spring of 2020, I was trying to understand how does this financial system really work, and I got into the weeds of Ray Dalio's how the economic machine works, and getting more into my Austrian econ and history, money, and all this. And I wrote a Bitcoin song, or really sound money song, and that's called "End the Fed." It's E.T.F, E period T period F period. By Mr. Pseu. It's streaming everywhere if you want to go check it out. But I kind of wrote that song just in a way for me to really wrap my head and understand everything that was going on around me, at a macroeconomic standpoint. And I was just really influenced by that entire year. And I was just trying to condense all that and the hopes and promises of Bitcoin into a fun rock and roll 3.5-minute format. So you can go check that out. Again, the artist is my name, Mr. Pseu, MR period PSEU, and the song's called ETF in all caps, period after each letter. And yeah, if you're a fan of the show and you understand the understandings of Ron Paul and a healthy foreign policy and just are liberty minded, then I think you'll if you dig this show, then I think you'll dig what I do and have cooking up.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Phil. And I will have links to everything in the show notes page. So go to YouTube, Odysee, Libertarian Institute, or any of our social media accounts, Facebook, Twitter, MeWe, and you could check that out. And I will also have a clip of Phil's song here before the show wraps up and ends. So, Phil, thank you again so much, and people check out his song, which, again, I'll play a little clip of right here.
Self-sovereignty, obeyed ourselves through bankruptcy, which bubble's about to burst. This can't get any. The standard's anything but gold.